Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Daily English Podcast. I'm James, your host for today.
And I'm Sophie, your co-host. We're so happy you could join us today. Whether you're listening on your way to work, at home, or taking a walk, we're glad you're here to learn English with us.
Absolutely. And today we have a really interesting topic that I think will help a lot of our listeners. Have you ever heard of first principles thinking? Sounds a bit fancy, right?
Yeah, it does. But don't worry. We're going to break it down, step by step. Today's episode is called Break It Down, Learn English Using First Principles Thinking. We'll explain what that means and show you how this way of thinking can really help you learn English faster and smarter.
So let's get started. First, Sophie, let's tell everyone a bit about our own experience with learning languages, or even just learning new things. Have you ever used first principles thinking before you even knew it had a name?
Oh, definitely. Actually, when I was learning Spanish in school, I didn't really follow the traditional way. Instead, I always tried to understand the basic rules, like why do verbs change like that, or what's the logic behind these sentence structures. I guess I was using first principles thinking before I knew what it was called.
That's so cool. For me, when I started learning guitar, I wanted to know not just how to play songs, but why certain chords sounded good together. I'd ask myself, what are the building blocks of music? So I guess, I used first principles thinking too. It's funny how we do it naturally sometimes.
Exactly, James. And that's why today's topic is so exciting. If you're listening and you're struggling with English, maybe you feel stuck or overwhelmed. First principles. Thinking can help you simplify things and make them clearer.
All right, before we dive deeper, let's explain what first principles thinking actually means. Sophie, do you want to take that?
Sure. So first principles. Thinking is a way of solving problems by breaking them down into their most basic parts, their building blocks. It means you don't just accept what you're told or copy what others do. You ask, why? What is this made of? How does it work? It's about understanding things from the ground up.
Yeah, and you might have heard of people like Elon Musk using this idea to invent new things. But honestly, it can be used for learning anything, including English.
That's right, and today we'll show you how. We'll talk about why first principles thinking is powerful for learning English, how you can use it, some challenges you might face, and of course, lots of practical examples.
So let's start with the basics. Why do people usually struggle when learning English? Sophie, do you remember any common problems?
Oh, for sure. A big one is memorizing long lists of vocabulary or grammar rules without really understanding them. It can feel like you're just repeating things over and over, but not really knowing why.
Exactly. And sometimes people feel like English is just a bunch of random exceptions, like, why do we say go, but then the past tense is went? Why not goed? And that's where first principles thinking can help. Instead of memorizing everything, you look for the basic rules and patterns.
Let's break that down a bit more. Imagine you're learning English for the first time. What if, instead of memorizing every new word, you try to understand how words are built? For example, many English words come from Latin or Greek roots. If you know the root, you can guess the meaning of other words.
Yeah, like the word television. Tele means far, and vision means to see. So television means seeing from far away. That's pretty cool, right?
Very cool. And by understanding roots like that, you can unlock the meaning of lots of new words. That's first principles thinking in action. You're not just memorizing, you're building from the basics.
Let's jump into our first major point, the definition and explanation of first principles thinking. Sophie, can you explain it with an example from learning English?
Sure. Imagine you want to improve your English speaking. Instead of just practicing conversations from a textbook, you ask, what is speaking? It's using words, grammar, and pronunciation to share ideas. So you break it down. You work on each part, learning words, practicing simple sentences, listening to how native speakers pronounce things. You focus on the basics first, then build up.
Right. And this way, you're not just copying. It's not just repeat after me. You understand what you're saying and why. You become more confident because you know the building blocks.
Exactly. And this works for grammar too. For example, instead of memorizing every tense, you can ask yourself, what is the point of tense? It's to show time when something happens. Once you know that, you can start to see the patterns.
So, moving on, let's talk about the pros and cons of first principles thinking for English learners. Sophie, what are some of the advantages?
Well, one big advantage is that it makes learning less scary. When you break things down, you realize they're not as hard as they first seem. You gain confidence because you understand the basics. Also, you can apply what you learn in new situations. You're not just repeating, you're creating.
Yeah, and I think another advantage is independence. You don't always need a teacher or a guidebook. You can figure things out on your own because you know how to look for the basic rules.
That's true. But let's be honest, there are some challenges too. First principles. Thinking takes time, especially at the beginning. You have to be patient and curious. Sometimes you might feel lost because you're not following a simple list, but in the long run, it pays off.
Absolutely. And sometimes the basics can be hard to find. You might need help from a teacher, a friend, or even resources online. But remember, asking why is always a good first step.
Let's talk about some misconceptions. James, have you ever heard someone say, English is just too irregular? You can't use logic to learn it?
Oh, all the time. People think English is just a bunch of exceptions, but actually there are lots of patterns. You just have to look for them. For example, most regular verbs add sia ed in the past tense. Sure, there are irregular verbs, but even those have groups and patterns.
That's right. Here's a quick tip. When you learn something new, ask yourself, what's the simplest version of this? For example, if you're learning how to make questions, start with yes/no questions. They're simple. Do you like pizza? Once you understand that, you can add more details.
Let's do a quick challenge for our listeners. Imagine you want to say, I went to the store yesterday. Break it down. What are the basics? You need a subject, a verb, and a time reference. Try to build the sentence from those parts.
Great idea. And remember, if you make a mistake, that's okay. The important thing is to understand why you chose each word. That's first principles thinking in practice.
Now let's share some personal stories. Sophie, have you ever used first principles thinking to solve a language problem?
Yes, actually. When I first tried to understand English articles, a, an, and the, I was really confused. But I stopped memorizing rules and asked myself, what is the purpose of these words? I realized they help show if something is specific or not. That little insight made everything easier.
That's a great example. For me, I struggled with phrasal verbs like give up or run into. Instead of memorizing each one, I started looking at the meaning of the main verb and the preposition. Like give plus up, to stop doing something. It started to make sense.
And that's so important. English has a lot of these little combinations. If you break them down, you can understand them better. Listeners, have you ever had an aha moment like that? Think about it for a second.
Now let's talk about cultural insights. In some cultures, school is all about memorizing. But in English-speaking countries, there's often a focus on asking questions and understanding. Sophie, have you noticed that?
Definitely. In my school in the UK, teachers encouraged us to ask why and to challenge ideas. It was a little scary at first, but it helped me think deeply. If you're coming from a background where memorizing is normal, first principles thinking might feel strange, but it can really help.
And it's not just for school. In daily life, if you don't understand something, you can always ask. English speakers usually appreciate curiosity.
Let's go back to examples. James, can you give us a real-life situation where someone could use first principles thinking to learn English?
Sure. Imagine you're at a restaurant and you see a word on the menu you don't know, like appetizer. Instead of just guessing, break it down. Ask, what part of the meal is this? Is it before or after the main dish? Maybe you notice other people eating small dishes first. You figure out, oh, appetizer means the food you eat before the main meal.
That's a perfect example, and you can use that same thinking when you hear new phrases or idioms. Don't panic, just ask yourself, what could this mean? What are the words telling me?
Let's talk about another benefit, motivation. When you break things down, you can see your progress more clearly. It's like building with blocks. You can see what you've made.
Exactly, and every time you understand a small part, you feel a little victory. That keeps you going. For example, the first time I used an English idiom correctly, I felt so proud. It was like, wow, I really get this.
So listeners, try to celebrate those small wins. They add up. And if something feels too big, break it into smaller parts.
Let's do another mini challenge. Think of a difficult English word or grammar point. Ask yourself, what is the simplest form of this? What is it used for? How can I use it in a simple sentence?
And if you're not sure, ask a friend or teacher, or look it up online. The important thing is to keep questioning and exploring.
Now let's talk about some actionable tips for using first principles thinking in your English studies. James, what's your first tip?
Tip number 1, always ask why. If you learn a new rule, ask yourself why it's like that. Don't just accept it, try to understand the reason behind it.
Great tip. My tip is break big problems into small pieces. If you want to improve your speaking, start with sounds, then words, then sentences. Step by step.
Another tip, use resources that explain the basics, not just the answers. For example, grammar books that show examples and reasons, not just lists.
And try to teach someone else what you've learned. Teaching is a great way to check if you really understand the basics.
Let's talk about a common mistake, trying to memorize everything. Sophie, why doesn't that work well?
Well, memorizing can help for a short time, but if you don't understand, you'll forget quickly. But if you know the reason behind something, you remember it longer. For example, knowing why I is always capitalized in English helps you not to forget it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes people try to learn all the vocabulary in a book, but if they don't use the words, they forget. It's better to focus on the most basic, useful words first.
Let's do a quick recap of what first principles thinking looks like in action. For example, if you want to understand questions in English, first ask, what is a question? It's a way to ask for information. Then look at the basic structure. Watchword, auxiliary verb, subject, main verb. Like, what do you eat for breakfast?
Exactly, and you can practice by making your own questions. Start simple, then add more detail.
Let's talk about cultural comparisons. In some languages, you always put the verb at the end, but in English, the order is usually subject, verb, object. Understanding this basic rule helps you build sentences easily.
Yeah, and if you know this, you can spot mistakes quickly. For example, if you see eat I pizza, you know that's not the right order in English. It should be I eat pizza.
Another cultural tip, in English, it's okay to make mistakes. People will still understand you and most will help you. So don't be afraid to try.
Let's discuss benefits again. Sophie, when did you feel that breaking things down really helped you?
I remember learning how to use the word get. It has so many meanings. But once I broke it down, like get as receive or get as become, it made more sense. I started to see patterns like get up, get ready, get tired. It wasn't just random anymore.
That's a great point. Listeners, if you feel stuck, try to find the basic meaning or structure. It can make everything clearer.
Let's talk about pronunciation. Sometimes people try to copy native speakers without knowing how the sounds are made. If you break down the sounds, like where does your tongue go, what shape is your mouth, it's much easier to improve.
Yeah, I remember struggling with the th sound. I watched videos, looked in the mirror, and practiced step by step. It felt strange at first, but breaking it down really helped.
So listeners, try to practice sounds one at a time. Don't rush. It's better to do it right slowly than quickly and wrong.
One more tip. If you're reading and you don't understand a sentence, break it down into smaller parts. Look for the subject, verb, and object. Ask yourself, what's happening here?
And always remember, learning is a journey. It's normal to feel confused sometimes. Just keep asking questions and breaking things down.
Let's make it interactive. Listeners, right now, think of a sentence you find difficult. Try to break it down. What does each word mean? What is the main action?
That's a great exercise. And if you want, write it down and try to explain it to a friend. Teaching is learning.
So let's review some key vocabulary from today's episode. Sophie, what's our first word?
The first word is principle. It means a basic idea or rule that forms the foundation of something. For example, honesty is an important principle in life.
Good one. The next word is breakdown. In English, it means to separate something into smaller parts to understand it better. For example, let's break down this sentence.
Another word is pattern. A pattern is something that repeats or a regular way something happens. For example, there's a pattern in how regular verbs change.
And let's not forget root. In language, a root is the main part of a word, often from another language. Like photo comes from Greek, meaning light.
Also, structure. This means the way parts are organized. In English, sentence structure means the order of words.
Another phrase is building block. That means a basic part that you use to make something bigger. Like words are the building blocks of sentences.
Let's do one more. Apply. In English, to apply means to use an idea in a real situation. For example, you can apply first principles thinking to your English studies.
Great! And these words are used a lot in English learning, so keep practicing them.
And just a quick note, some of these words come from Latin or Greek, so you might see them in other languages too. That's another reason to learn roots.
All right, Sophie, let's wrap up. What's your biggest takeaway from today's episode?
I think the most important thing is don't be afraid to ask why. When you break things down, English becomes less scary and more interesting. And remember, it's normal to struggle at first, but every little step helps.
Yeah, and for me, I'd say, learning English isn't just about memorizing, it's about understanding. If you use first principles thinking, you can learn faster, remember better, and enjoy the process.
We hope today's episode gives you a new way to think about learning English. Try breaking things down, ask questions, and celebrate your progress.
Thank you so much for listening to the Daily English Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend or leave us a review. We love hearing from you.
And remember, you can always send us your questions or stories. We'd love to help you on your English journey.
Until next time, keep learning, keep asking why, and keep breaking it down.
Bye for now. Have a wonderful day, everyone.